Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the Townhall, our newest open panel discussion podcast about tackling the internal issues preventing progress within the Black community. I'm your host and moderator, Brianna Rhodes, and today we will be discussing the Black education movement. Before we begin, allow me to introduce my lovely panel of guests. So, first off is Dr. Lucretia Taylor.
Hello.
Hi. Next is Tiffany Rosier. Next is Brandon Hull.
Hello.
Hi. Next is Dr. Marguerite Heinrich.
Greetings.
Hello. Next is Skylar Caesar.
Hello.
Hi. And last but not least is Victor Sandifer.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good.
That's great. So, thank you all so much for being available for this discussion. We have a lot to tackle during this episode, so let's jump right on in. So, as I said, we're discussing the Black education movement. And I want to start off by asking you all, how is education as it currently exists? How is it helping advance the Black student into a prepared Black professional?
I'll jump in.
Okay.
And so, I have a lot of thoughts when we talk about helping the Black student as a prepared professional. And I think we have to distinguish between those that attend primarily white institutions versus those that attend HBCUs because the preparation is very different. I always say that college is more than just the education that you get, but the people that you surround yourself with and the self-esteem that is developed when you're on campus, the connections and professional connections that you make while there. And so although, PWIs exist, I'm a proponent for HBCUs because I think they best prepare Black professionals for the world by allowing a space where you are able to make mistakes and not be ridiculed and be lifted up and protected and comforted and, also being expected to, execute excellence. It's not a space where, you can just go and fly through classes, but that the excellence exists.
Mm-hmm.
And so how to be in professional spaces, again, we were talking in our last episode about authenticity and understanding your own voice and your own power and even, the responsibilities that you have for other Black professionals in those spaces. And I think HBCUs do a phenomenal job with preparing Black professionals for Black professional worlds. And PWIs just don't give the same attention to how to develop a Black person while they're entering into the professional world, especially in entry-level positions where it is white dominated and you sometimes don't know how to make sure that you're getting paid fairly or that you're asking for the promotion when necessary, or that you're outworking your white counterpart and they get a promotion, and how do you speak up for yourself? So there's more than just the education that happens in educational institutions. It's really about the preparation for life and how you navigate life and the networks that you create to help you navigate life.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that I think that we have a long way to go with taking care of our Black babies and making sure that they know what's going on. And that's my primary drive in being a history teacher now. I specifically wanted to teach history, and I specifically wanted to work in a space that dealt with minorities because I feel like often when it comes to education, that Black people are not afforded the same opportunities as our white counterparts. And we are also not taught just how powerful we really are. I have cultural reset days in my class once a week where I just affirm with my students that you are smart, you are intelligent, you can be whatever you want to be. And I think it's very important to do that because a lot of times, based off of, how you grew up, you come in with a defeatist attitude, and you just have to know that you can be just as successful even more successful, honestly, than any of your white counterparts, So I really think that it's important with education that you have to lay the groundwork for making sure that one, spaces are safe, as Dr. Taylor said, for your Black students to make mistakes and know that it's okay, and that you just get up and you go harder, and it's just fine.
Yeah. I kind
I
of want to
definitely
pick
think. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Well, you could go on, Scott.
Oh, I was going to say, I definitely feel like different institutions prepare people in different ways. And I think that there's definitely benefits to both. Like when I think back to my childhood, and I went to like a PWI, like through elementary, middle, high school, and then college, I went to, I guess, majority like Asian and Hispanic. But when I think about my childhood, when I was younger, I really wanted to go to like a predominantly Black institution. And I feel like I was missing out on that opportunity. But then when I look back at the successes that I've gotten, through the schools that I've gone to, I realized that those prepared me in a way that maybe those other institutions wouldn't have. I think there are some benefits to going to those, maybe areas of self-esteem or sense of community and identity and things like that. But I also feel like if I would have gone to maybe a school that wasn't at the levels of the schools I did go to, would I have achieved the successes that I've achieved at 24 years old this early? So something to think about.
I kind of want to pick up off of that because I am a product of PWI with my undergrad and master's. I went to UNC Chapel Hill. I think that's like the first public university in the nation. And I can tell you all right now, I wish I would have attended the HBCU. It's something I've been grappling with ever since I graduated from undergrad in 2015. Just knowing how, like, you kind of see the racism seeping out of the buildings, kind of. Every building is named after like a KKK member or somebody that's rooting in white supremacy. You know about Silent Sam and all that stuff. That just can go on for days talking about the 4 years that I spent there. And based on like where I used to live in Chapel Hill, it was the RDU area. So we had North Carolina Central, we had North Carolina A&T, and all those great HBCUs. And whenever I used to go just like spend a weekend there, I was like, wow, this experience is like no other. It's like, what, how did I miss out on this? Then you go to like a Carolina game and all you're doing is jumping and it's nothing, no culture, no swag to it. So I am very proud of like where I've been able to be at, like, based off of my background in education, going to Carolina and UMD College Park. But it's something about that experience, like you said, Dr. Taylor, that is not comparable to what I saw on those campuses, HBCU campuses.
It's not too late. Go ahead and get that doctorate.
You know what? I think I am an African American literature. You'll see me soon.
So I wanted
That's
to.
right. I think. Oh, go ahead, Victor.
I was just going to add that I wanted to talk about kind of my experience in the K through 12 because I think that's like the foundational peers for a lot of folks. So in particularly like elementary school. So I'm from Oakland, and I went to elementary school at Lincoln Elementary, which is in downtown Oakland, which is in the heart of Chinatown. And so the majority of the students that I went to school with in elementary school were of Asian descent. So one of the things that was interesting about them was that after school, while I would be going home to go play basketball or go back home and chill and kick it, they were going right back to school, lining up across the street at this other place, going back to what they call Chinese school. And I was, as a kid, I'm like, yo, I don't know why y'all going back to school. I would never do 7 to 8 hours of school, then go back for another 2 or 3 just to go back. But when I look back at and reflect on it, this concept of like learning culture. So when we talk about what we're not learning in our schools, the kind of like, I guess, pride in self that we don't necessarily have because of the way the school system beats it out of us, how society beats it out of us. They were their families found it a point to combat that by having them go back to school and learn their history, to learn their culture, to learn different things outside of the traditional school system. So yes, learn about the tools that America has so you can kind of navigate these American waters, but also you're going to have a strong foundation of self. So I think in some ways, I think a lot of our K through 12 don't do that for Black students, and I think in certain ways it's going to be up to us to take that on and take that responsibility. And I know there's schools out there that do that, but I think on a more consistent basis, like more of our schools need to have that in there for us, or our communities need to have that for us.
I think what's crazy is that the government realizes that there is power in that because I live in Houston, so Texas, our governor has actually banned critical race
Mhm.
theory, and I said, great, because my kids came to me and they were like, "Well, what is this?" And I said, "I'm kind of glad that I guess this isn't made media news because if there's one thing that I think if you want a kid to be interested in something or what's going on in something, is tell them, oh no, tell them no, you can't do this because that is just going to naturally pique their curiosity." And so, luckily, like I said, I work for a charter school, and we had a meeting at the beginning of the year because I'm like, half of what I teach is about racism. So what am I doing? And they said, oh, just
That's not critical race theory. I wrote my whole dissertation on critical race theory. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
oh, no, you're fine. So I'm like, so how am I supposed to teach? Like when the governor is banning it, and they said we actually don't care what the governor says, so continue.
But
So
you
I
all
really
don't teach critical race theory. And I think that that's something that's so important. I mean, teaching race and racism in America is not critical race theory. Critical race theory is a doctoral level, scholarly theory that only people that are in law school that are or that are in graduate school study. And it's so complex and it was so triggering and traumatizing for me to learn it. It took me 3 years to learn all about it, right? And so I think just the misconception of what critical race theory is and the idea that it's even taught in K through 12 schools is outrageous because it's not. Now, critical race theory informs teachers, great teachers like you, Brandon, on how to be great teachers, right? Because the people that study critical race theory then produce and create content that you can consume and then present to students, right? And so it's that part of it is very frustrating to me. But also, because Black American history is American history, until we arrive at the place where Oakland Unified School District is, and they were the focus of my doctoral study, where they're teaching ethnic studies as a mandatory course in ninth grade. Now we're on to something. Now, you can have a Black student learn about, their position in society without feeling othered, right? Because it's a part of the required curriculum. So it does start in K through 12. Black students, public education is not made for Black students. And so a lot of Black students don't even make it to college. And so before we can engage in a conversation around them going to an HBCU or a PWI or a state school or a private school, we have to talk about public education's failure to teach truth in curriculum, especially around American history and Blackness in America.
And I
So,
think even
Victor,
if I was gonna say, and even just to add to that, like not even just for Black students, for those white students and other students too. So when you know that and you hear all that information about what the contribution of Black folks is to this world and to this country, then you have to take a pride in that because it's a part of your history too, and not to other it. Like that's what they try to do with our history, is like other it from and separate it from America. So yeah, just in addition to that, I just wanted to add that.
yeah, that's a good take.
I have a question. Do you guys think it's our job to teach white people about Black history, or do you feel like they should, if they're truly interested in knowing, that they should do the legwork? Because I struggle with that.
See,
I
my thing
struggle.
is that
I was just going to say, I think again, Black history is American history. So I don't think that, think that we hold them accountable enough to the idea that our history is a shared history, that they have a responsibility as much as we do of teaching.
That was my point. I was gonna say it. Another place that you end up finding it is when I went to culinary school, what we don't learn about are any Black contributions to culinary history in the United States or in the world, or where food comes from, and where things are produced and things like that. And so it's just another place where the lack of information creates a very one-dimensional education. I think if you know all of that information, like it just creates a 3D life for you as a person, as a human being, sharing a planet with other human beings. You should know what other human beings are doing, like especially the ones that live next door to you. And with the way education, of course, in the United States works, it's like, essentially they weren't trying to educate anybody. They were trying to train factory workers. Let's get them to be able to sit someplace for 8 hours and get them to follow instructions and then send them out to work. So, when you talk to everybody's great grandparents, they were like, oh, I only have a 3rd or 5th grade education. That was not something unique to specifically Black communities. That was something unique to almost everybody's community. Women weren't allowed to be educated. So I think when we talk about that kind of mechanism, that's how you end up where we are right now, is that education, public education, wasn't about educating anybody. It was about training factory workers, because during the Industrial Revolution, that's what you needed, was factory workers, people who could stand in one spot and follow instructions and do the same thing over and over again repetitiously, until unions started to show up and go, you can't work people 80 hours a week. And then all of a sudden we're at a 40-hour work week. But we still have this mentality around working in a factory, even with all of the new things we do now. And so as we continue to like just double down on this idea that we just need to train drones essentially, or train robots essentially, to go out into the workforce has changed drastically. And so everyone's undereducated at this point. I, like to your point, Victor, Korean kids, they're and I only talk about Korea because I have so many friends who are Korean. They're like, they go to school 10 to 12 hours a day in Korea. So it's not like having extended education is not something unique to any place else in the world but here. Mm-hmm. Like, we the only ones beefing people about that. Their kids go right back to, they go back for study. They go, I mean, they have, of course, right now there, you know, there's a fight against, you know, students being so pressured because they have such high suicide rates because of it, directly connected to education. But this idea that learning about who you are in the world should only take 7 to 8 hours a day, and then also learning about how we are in the world collectively should only be squeezed into 8 hours a day. Most countries are not subscribing to that. So I can see how we continue to distill education in this country, because you're not interested in education. You're interested in training employees.
And with that, to further answer the question, our system isn't like it's failing us rurally, because right now all those jobs that they were preparing us for are obsolete, and they're being taken over by robots and AI. So a lot of our education now needs to be about how do you code and how you figure out how to program these computers to be able to take over the jobs that that they say nobody wants, but that they're erasing from existence. So we have to start teaching our kids how to code and do those kind of things if we're going to be able to be competitive, I guess, in the workforce, if that's what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Who do you all believe is responsible for educating Black students thoroughly and appropriately? You know, like we're talking about the school, but like what about outside of school? And what about at the home?
Yeah, I was going to say, I am raising 2 young Black boys, and I find every opportunity to have them see the connections between the things that we're reading our books. Like, we have book subscriptions with only Black faces, you know, because they see enough of the other stuff in the world. Making the connections between what they're reading and what they're learning to school, and how they can learn to advocate for themselves. So I'm using, you know, school as kind of like a means to an end, right? Like, they go to Montessori school right now. They're learning how to socialize. They're very 2.5. He's learning how to socialize, how to play, how to learn those social skills. But at home, we're learning critical thinking. We're learning how life skills, cleaning up after yourself, and those will continue. I do put a lot of the pressure on the parents, but unfortunately, not everyone is in the position to have that kind of time and intentionality with their children, because they're hustling to make $1. They've got to work. They've got other children, whatever the case is, whatever the circumstances are. I'm not going to pretend that everyone's circumstances are the same. So I really put it on the Black community, you know, for us to educate our own, because no one is going to do it. Like, we're begging these folks to give us a class, give us an ethnic studies, give us a this, give us a that. And the systems weren't designed for Black folks. The systems weren't designed for us to be thinkers and entrepreneurs and doctors and leaders of the world. It's designed for us to be workers. And I'm not having it with mine, you know. And how do we come together? Like, there are some private Black schools that we have in like Los Angeles, but there's not enough of them that are teaching, you know, liberation and freedom and how to really be in this world as a Black man or a Black woman. So I put it on the community. I put it on the parents.
I agree, definitely, as a parent. And Skylar, were you on this trip to the South? The 2018 trip, right?
Yeah.
And so I brought my children on a very important trip in 2018. We commemorated the 50th anniversary of MLK's assassination. And we went on a trip through the Deep South. And it was a life-changing and a life-informing experience for me, but also my children, because it was my way of teaching my, at the time, 8 and 12-year-old about what it meant to be Black in America. And so to travel the steps of the poverty tour and to stop at Medgar Evers' home and MLK's resting place and the tomb of the unknown slave and all of the other dozens of places that we stopped, right, Skylar? To have the privilege of showing them what it means to be Black in America. I felt like, okay, even if you can't travel, you can utilize the museums and history that's in your area to inform what it means to be Black, because it's all around us, even locally. But to really get a real clear understanding of what it means to be Black in America, you have to visit the Deep South.
So can I ask a question around that? So, part of the story is to be Black in America. And I'll tell a little bit about, I went to a primarily white high school. And it was very challenging for me. And I remember the day when we had the unit on enslaved Africans. And my teacher turned to me and asked me how I felt about whatever the reading was. And at that moment, I knew there was something missing. I was like, this isn't right. Something doesn't feel good in my soul, And I was in 12th grade and had already applied to all these PWIs, not even knowing that HBCUs existed. I lived on the West Coast. There's never any mention of HBCUs. And for some reason, my grandmother came in and she said, oh, you should look at da-da-da. And I was like, what? There's a school made for me. I say all that to say is that, there needs to be, the question is, getting the information of who we were before slavery existed into the minds of our young people, that our existence did not begin with being enslaved, because that in itself, I think, it can be mind-boggling and weigh you down in a way that, it didn't happen for me. I sought another way. I sought a way out. But for some, it may be, well, this is how we start. We're just slaves. And, and that mentality of, hustle and fight and just get what you can because you're not meant for anything greater. And so teaching that we are kings and queens who have developed languages and architect and all of these magnificent things into the minds of our young people before they hit middle school. And that's my hope. And so if you all have any, ideas or thoughts around doing that, then I'd be really interested in hearing.
I think that that's great. And my partner is a teacher, and he teaches a lot about Hypatia and math and kings and queens and empires and legacies that existed far before 1619, right? But I do just want to note that our existence and our story in America is really about liberation, freedom, and justice. It's not about enslavement. We descended from slavery, and slavery was really horrible, right? But when you walk the path of our ancestors, Dr. King and all of the other freedom fighters that, that gave their lives, it really is a liberation story. However, I think it is important to acknowledge the diaspora and understand where all of humanity kind of resonates, including math, science, right? And that comes from, Africa. Our daughter's name is Ya Asantewaa, right? She was a Ghanaian queen. So you have to ground yourself and root yourself. She liberated the Ghanaian army, right? From white folks. You have to kind of root yourself in all meaning and experience in all of it, because it all matters. But I do think that our existence is more informed by our identity as descendants of American slavery and Blacks in America than it is of, being descendant of generations of far empires ago in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
I think a good way to,
You can just the last comment before we close out the
I think a good way to tell these stories is through the media as well too, especially because we are in a technology-driven society. I had kids come up to me and ask me about Tulsa because we just celebrated the centennial of the burning down of Tulsa, and then I just saw, I think LeBron James did a documentary on it, or he produced a documentary for it. And so I showed it in class. I don't think I was supposed to, but I showed it in class. And just even seeing on social media so many adults that were saying that they hadn't even realized had that Tulsa was a thing, and like even HBO spearheading this with Watchmen and with Lovecraft, you know, so a lot of people didn't even know about that story in particular. So I feel like as long as we have those people that are in those rooms, like saying, hey, these are the stories that need to be told. That's why I push for Black people to be in those media spaces and say, hey, this is something that needs to be talked about. Everyone watches like TV, or they scroll social media and stuff like that. So I think that that would be a great way to continue to tell our stories the way that we want to tell them. You know, it's important.
I agree. Like, even with my profession as a journalist, that's one thing I made sure that was done even in undergrad and grad school. I said, if I'm not writing about the Black community, I don't want it. Politics, we have everything. Politics, health, anything could be written in the Black angle. So that's something that I'm glad you said, Brandon, because that's something that I've been working on, is like the Black neighborhoods and trying to let my millennial group and just people before me and after me know about this history. I kind of see myself as like a little baby historic preservationist. So I think that's important, and I pray that we continue to like talk about these great things. And I wish we could talk about this a little bit more. We'll talk about it later, though. But this will conclude this episode. And I want to thank you to our guests, and thank you all for joining us for this episode of the Town Hall on the Polaris Network.